Hello everyone, you are watching Naresh IAS Academy YouTube channel. Now I am going to discuss next topic from World History for IAS Mains GS paper 1. So I have already completed the GS paper 2 through the 20 videos and these have uploaded on the YouTube channel, so you may take help from there. And this is my next series to complete the GS paper 1 again through the 20 videos, and you may contact for offline classes or the answer writing session. And this is the next topic, backgrounds of First and the Second World War and the world between the two wars. Important topic from the questions point of view. The World War I during 1914 to 1918 and World War II during 1939 to 1945. Okay, so then this is the topic. Simply I will explain the three aspects: background of the World War I and the economic and political situation of the world between the two wars, and the far-reaching impacts of the World War II. Okay, so first I will start from the backgrounds. You have to deeply study the two or three aspects regarding the backgrounds. One is the unification of Germany and Italy in 1870 or 71. How much extent was responsible for the World War I? So you have to identify the approach. How can we link this? After getting unification, Germany and Italy became the nation states, and now they tried to expand their political influence not only in the European continent but beyond the Europe, in the African continent, Asian continent. And now these two countries joined the race for colonialism or imperialism. Definitely they were resisted by the earlier established powers just like Britain and France. So this is the one aspect. And the second aspect is Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany, and the how much extent the political diplomacy of the Bismarck was responsible, and what kinds of background was created by the Bismarcks. And the third is the concept of nation state. The concept of nation states emerged in the mainly 18th century, and in the 19th century it was at its the zenith after the unification of Germany and Italy. And the World War I have its political dimensions. On the one hand, so many strong political powers, they were getting the colonial benefits from the different part of the world, and on the other hand, these were the colonies, they were suffering at the different spheres of their life. So this was the important contradiction between the colonial power and the colonies. And finally, the economic or political benefits between the two became the important factors for the World War I. And to what extent Germany can be held responsible for the World War I? This is the one of the most aspect. You know, when the Germany got its unification in 1870 or 71, so simply it was at the cost of humiliation or insulting of the Palace of Versailles, the symbols of French monarch. Definitely after the unification, the French people determined to take avenge against the Germany, and the Germany also was feeling the avenge since the past, because the unification of the Germany was obstructed mainly by the French. So we can say in the past the relationship between Germany and French, this was the rivalry or complete hostility, and in the broad sense we can say including the different countries into the military blocks or the army blocks, it was resulted into the World War I. Okay, so then these aspects you must know while you are covering the topic. The next aspect is, when the World War I was over in 1918, and for the restoration or revivement of the world, the Paris Peace Conferences were started in 1919. Paris Peace Conferences. So there were two important aspects. Were these conferences tried to diagnose the honestly settlements of the problems or to ensure peace and security throughout the world. So then definitely we can say there was contradiction in the Paris Peace Conferences. On the one hand, in these conferences, first time international organization like the League of Nations was founded in 1919, and it was strengthened to providing the different kinds of power and playing important role at the global level. So this was the theoretical aspect. So on the one hand, the Paris Peace Conference leaders were presenting their intention to showing the establishment of the League of Nations. Definitely we will protect the poor countries or developing countries from the hegemony of the developed countries, and we will ensure the peace and stability for a long time. While on the other hand, Paris Peace Conferences made a strict provision against Germany through the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles definitely became important humiliating factors for Germany, and now Germany started to acquire power and to take avenge against the France and Britain. So before the World War I, France determined to avenge against Germany, and now French completed its oath through the Treaty of Versailles. But the provisions of Treaty of Versailles in the economic sector, political sector, social sector, definitely too much strict, and it was seen just like a complete injustice, or the one-sided provisions were imposed severely over the Germany. And among these, the rise of Hitler as a dictator of Germany, and who led the ideology of Nazism and who organized the Nazi party. So this was definitely a contradiction. On the one hand, the Paris Peace Conference leader were making provisions for establishing peace, security, stability through the League of Nations. On the other hand, they were trying to fulfilling their vested interest, imposing strict regulations over the Germany and the different allies of the Germany. So definitely it was simply a delay of postpone of 20 years. Just after 20 years, the outbreak of Second World War in 1939. So then we cannot analyze this was the honestly made provisions for the settlement of the problems. And the another aspect is there was a threat before the political systems of the different European countries. Britain, France then established the political governance, democracies, and the democratic systems now were in a dilemma, because on the one hand there was rapidly rising of fascist ideology in Italy and Nazism in Germany and some other despotic or dictatorship were seen in the world, and on the other hand the democratic governance systems were trying to facilitate to their peoples through the education, public health, sanitation, water supply and quality of life. And on the other hand they were realizing threat from the these dictators. So then to meet the challenges arising out of these circumstances, the democratic system compromised with their welfare schemes, and now they started to the weaponization or the armament of their armies, the large armies. They spend too much for the weapons and the army practice, and they postponed the constitutional values, and most of the constitutional rights were seized that time. Political civil rights were not given to their peoples, and the liberty were restricted in the different areas. So that time the democratic governing system also under the threat or restriction due to the emergence of these fascist or the Nazi ideologies. And in the last you have to analyze to what extent Treaty of Versailles was responsible for the Second World War, or how much extent we can make the accountability of the failure of League of Nations. Why the League of Nations failed to protect the different countries or to protect the poor countries dragging by the fascist or Nazi powers in their blocks. So definitely the League of Nations was hampered by the decisions of Britain, France and their allies. The League of Nations simply was working due to the intention of these countries, this was the international organization in the pockets of these countries. So League of Nations, we could not that time think it was able to protect the world from the second wars. Treaty of Versailles definitely responsible for a large extent. There may be a avoidance of World War II if Britain and France have shown a respectful behavior towards the Germany. League of Nations also have tried to maintain the healthy relationship or tried to compensate with the Germany in their economic penalties or different kinds of humiliating restrictions, and other countries if had a mediatorship between Germany, France and Britain. So definitely it may be for some extent there was the least scope for the Second World War. But such kinds of efforts never be discussed and never be implemented. So, the Treaty of Versailles provided a fertile environment for the rising of Hitler, a dictator in the Germany. Hitler mainly organized their peoples and convinced them the deteriorating condition of Germany is only due to this treaty, and France and Britain are responsible for this treaty. So, if we have to stand our countries again in the respectful line, we have to revenge against the France and Britain. Definitely, the Second World War was outbreak with the invasion of, or we can say the attack of Hitler over the Poland, 1st September 1939. And the last aspect of the World War II is the far-reaching impact. What kind of consequences occurred in the world economy and political sector, social sector? First, this was the establishment of United Nations Organization UNO in 1945. League of Nations was abolished and it was replaced by a broader or the more strengthened organization UNO, and its organs, specific agencies, the all setup was founded. The UNO definitely a important consequence of the World War II, and it was definitely a far reaching because it is still working and trying to maintain international peace, security and stability. Second, the commencement of Cold War between capitalism and communism. Capitalism as the ideology led by the America, Britain, France and other countries, while the communism led by the Russia and China and their allies. So this was the Cold War. Just after the Second World War, an indirect war or Cold War again dragged the world into the fire of the wars. And the third, in this scenario, this was very crucial time for India and the other countries of Asian and African continent. They got independence just after the 1945, and India led these countries and organized the non-alignment ideology and movement. Then non-alignment ideology or movement was the third consequence, and fourth is these countries, India and other countries, raised their voice against the colonial and the imperial ideologies, and the colonialism and imperialism were ended soon just after their voice. And these countries also raised the problems against the racial discrimination or racism, through which the Christianity established their dominance over the Eastern cultures like the India, and the concept of racism was also that time left. And this was a next debate started. The world must be a unipolar world under the two polar or the multipolar. India like countries started work to make world as the multipolar world, and but due to the Cold War, the entire world ideologically divided into the two poles. The one pole led by the capitalist ideology, another by the communist ideology. However, the non-aligned movement tried to maintain the equal distance from these poles, but indirectly they were affected. So, these consequences you can trace in the political sectors and in the economic sectors. Due to the Second World War, the Europe and the global economy was severely affected, and Simply we can say this was the complete devastation or collapse of the economies, economic activity, trade, commerce cycles was immediately stopped. So for the restoration or revival of the world economy, the economic global organization was set up, and for this a conference was held at Bretton Woods city of America in 1945, and these conferences were resulted into the establishment of World Bank and its group and International Monetary Fund. So these are the Bretton Woods conclusion or the consequences. So now the World Bank started assisting for socio-economic development to the developing countries, and the IMF started for maintaining the balance of payment, balance of trade, and the stabilization of exchange rate between the different countries. So then just after the Second World War, you can trace the so many consequences. So you must try to understand this topic under the three dimension. First, the background just after the World War I and world between the two wars, and the consequences of the Second World War, and how much extent some of its consequences are still working in the 21st century, and they are affecting the political or economic decisions of the different countries. Okay, thank you.